The city of Nova Prime never slept. Its towers of steel and glass rose high into the sky, reflecting neon lights that painted the streets in colors no one could name. Hovercars zoomed between the buildings, and people moved quickly on suspended walkways. Life here was fast, loud, and sometimes dangerous. But for Kai, danger was nothing new. He thrived on it. He had been a firefighter for nearly 10 years, and stories of people trapped in burning buildings were not just news to him. They were challenges he could not resist. On that morning, the city was quieter than usual. Smoke had started rising from the heart of the financial district, a place usually buzzing with energy and activity. People screamed and ran as the lower floors of a massive tower erupted in fire. Windows shattered, sending glass like rain onto the streets below. The fire alarm had barely finished blaring when the explosion shook the city, and debris rained down like hail. Kai was already on his way. He had received the call moments before the explosion, but nothing could have prepared him for the sight that met him at the scene. Flames roared from the skyscraper, licking the clouds above. The heat was intense. Even from the street, he could hear the cries of people trapped inside, voices calling for help that seemed almost too small against the roar of the inferno. Ignoring the crowd of terrified citizens and the chaos around him, Kai grabbed his equipment and ran toward the building. His training told him to wait, to stay back until backup arrived. But he did not listen. There was no time for waiting. His gut told him that someone needed him inside, and he could not turn away. As he entered the lobby, smoke stung his eyes and thickened the air. His lungs burned, but he forced himself to keep moving. Heat radiated from every corner. Flames had already consumed the walls in some areas, and ceiling panels were collapsing. Each step required careful calculation. One wrong move could trap him inside forever. But he did not stop. He did not hesitate. His mind focused on only one thing, finding the source of the cries he had heard from outside. Then he saw her. She was trapped under a heavy beam, her body pressed against the floor as the fire crept closer. Smoke filled her lungs, and her face was pale and streaked with soot. Her small hand reached out, trembling, begging for help. Kai did not think. He ran to her, bracing himself against the heat, and lifted the beam. It was heavier than he had expected, but adrenaline and determination gave him the strength to hold it long enough to pull her free. She coughed violently as he carried her through the flames, and he wrapped his jacket around her to shield her from the heat. Every step was a struggle. Falling debris forced him to dodge quickly, and the fire seemed to sense his presence, flaring hotter as if challenging him. He shouted to get her attention, to keep her conscious, and she weakly opened her eyes, frightened but alive. The heat intensified, and the stairs were slick with melting materials and water from sprinklers. Kai took each step slowly, making sure she did not slip. Every sound was amplified in the confined space. The crackle of fire, the groan of metal, the distant screams of people still trapped above. Kai felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but he did not let it stop him. By the time they reached the lobby again, the fire had grown larger, and the building trembled as if it might collapse at any second. He pushed open the main doors, and the sunlight hit him like a wall, burning through the smoke. People outside gasped as they saw him emerge carrying a girl. Some ran toward them. Others stared in disbelief. He gently set her down, and she coughed again, drawing in fresh air for the first time in what felt like hours. Kai looked at her closely for the first time. She was young, probably in her late teens, with hair the color of autumn leaves and eyes that sparkled even through the soot and tears. There was something about her, something that seemed different, though he could not place it. She shivered, not from fear alone, but from the cold that rushed in after escaping the heat. Before he could speak to her, a fleet of drones arrived. Small, sleek, and fast, they hovered around them, scanning and assessing. Within moments, a team of uniformed agents descended, moving with precision and authority. One of them, a tall man with a calm but commanding presence, gestured for Kai to step back. "She is under our protection now," the man said, his voice firm. "You did well to bring her out, but you must leave." Kai hesitated. He had saved her, and instinctively, he did not want to let her go to strangers, but the agents were efficient, and their calm confidence suggested they knew what they were doing. He nodded reluctantly, watching as they lifted her into a hover pod. As the pod ascended, Kai could not shake the feeling that something about this girl was extraordinary. There was a sense of importance in the way the agents treated her, in the way they moved around her with respect and caution. He had seen powerful people before, leaders and officials, but this was different. She carried herself with a quiet authority that seemed almost natural, as if people instinctively recognized her presence. He wanted to follow to make sure she was safe, but there was no way to reach the pod. He stayed on the ground, watching it disappear into the sky, wondering who she was and why the fire had started in the first place. The city around him was recovering from the chaos. Emergency teams were attending to the wounded, and the fire continued to burn in parts of the building, though controlled. People whispered about the miraculous rescue, and some even cheered for the firefighter who had risked everything. Kai, however, did not feel like a hero. He only felt a strange sense of unease, a lingering thought that this girl's life was tied to something far larger than he could imagine. That night, Kai returned to his small apartment. He was exhausted, every muscle aching from the heat and the weight of the beam he had lifted, but he could not sleep. His mind kept returning to the girl. There was something about her that pulled at him, not romantically, not in any way he could define, but in a way that made him certain that her story was not over. By the time he finally drifted into a fitful sleep, he was haunted by visions of flames, falling debris, and the girl's pale face looking up at him. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he felt that he had stepped into a story much larger than himself, one that would test his courage, his wits, and his very humanity. Little did he know, this single act of bravery, the rush into fire without thought for his own life, had placed him on a path that would change the course of the galaxy. The girl he saved was not an ordinary citizen. She carried a title that could ignite wars or unite planets. And Kai, a man used to running into burning buildings without hesitation, would soon find that his human ingenuity, determination, and courage were more valuable than any weapon, any technology, any elite army. In the city that never slept, under neon skies and amidst the hum of hover cars, a story of courage, destiny, and the unexpected power of the human spirit had just begun. Kai had rushed into fire to save a life, and unknowingly he had become a key player in a game that reached far beyond the streets of Nova Prime. Kai could not stop thinking about her. The girl's face, pale and smudged with soot, haunted his mind. He had saved her from the flames, but the way she had been carried away by the strange agents left him uneasy. Who were they? Why had they acted so fast? And why did he feel that her life was more important than anyone else's in the city? The next morning, Kai returned to the scene of the fire. The building was surrounded by barriers and patrol drones. Investigators moved in and out, examining the charred remains of the tower. Smoke still rose from cracks in the walls, and the smell of burned metal and plastic lingered in the air. Citizens whispered among themselves, sharing stories of the miraculous rescue. Some pointed toward the street where Kai had carried her, praising him quietly, as if recognizing that without him, the girl would have been lost. Kai's curiosity grew stronger by the hour. He had saved someone, yes, but why had the agents taken her so quickly and so carefully? There was something unusual about her, something more than human attention would explain. He decided to find out more, though he had no plan, no clue how to do so. His instincts told him that the answers were out there, waiting for him. That evening, he followed the path the hoverpod had taken. He stayed hidden in shadows, slipping past city checkpoints and scanning rooftops with his binoculars. The pod moved silently through the sky, descending to a heavily fortified compound on the outskirts of Nova Prime. It was unlike anything Kai had ever seen. High walls of shimmering metal, anti-drone fields, and armed guards made it clear this was no ordinary building. The girl was inside, and he felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that she was safe, dread because the people protecting her were clearly not ordinary. Kai spent hours watching. He noticed how the staff moved quickly and efficiently, how the girl's presence commanded respect without her needing to speak. Even the guards seemed alert, but not fearful. There was a sense that she carried authority in her very being. Finally, he could no longer resist. He had to know who she was. The next day, Kai learned the truth through a brief conversation with one of the compound's attendants. The man had been speaking to another citizen when Kai accidentally overheard him. The heiress must never be exposed. Lyra's life depends on secrecy. If the rogue factions discover her, it could start a war. The attendant whispered urgently. Kai froze. Lyra. That was her name. And she was an heiress. Not just any heiress, but the last living member of the Solara dynasty, rulers of a coalition of planets that stretched across the stars. His heart raced. The girl he had saved from a burning building was of royal blood, the kind of person whose death could spark conflict across galaxies. He realized then how much danger she had been in, how fragile the line between life and death had been. His act of bravery had not been just heroic, it had been pivotal. If he had hesitated, she might have died, and the consequences could have been unimaginable. Despite understanding her importance, Kai could not shake his desire to ensure her safety personally. He needed to know more, to see her again, and perhaps to help her in ways the royal guards could not. But how could he approach someone so protected, someone whose life was surrounded by secrecy and danger? Determined, Kai waited until nightfall. The city's lights reflected in the rivers that ran between the towering buildings, creating an almost magical glow. He navigated the alleys and streets with practiced skill, avoiding security patrols and drones. He was not a spy, not trained in infiltration, but he was human, and humans had a special ability to adapt, to improvise, and to survive against odds that no machine could predict. Finally, Kai reached a point where he could see the compound from a rooftop. It was silent now, almost serene, yet he knew that beneath its calm exterior lay constant vigilance. He saw Lyra in a courtyard, standing tall and calm despite the tension around her. She moved with grace and authority, issuing instructions to the staff, checking plans, and observing the compound. Even from a distance, Kai felt a connection. He had saved her life, and somehow that link remained, unbroken by distance or circumstance. The following days were tense. Kai watched from afar, learning more about Lyra and the dangerous forces pursuing her. The fire had been no accident. It was a targeted attack orchestrated by a faction seeking to destabilize the Solara dynasty. They wanted to remove the heir and seize control, and the explosion had been just the beginning. Kai's admiration for her grew. She was young, yet wise beyond her years. Her composure in the face of danger inspired him. She had been trained for diplomacy and leadership, but now he saw another side. Her courage, her determination, her ability to act quickly when lives were at stake. It reminded him of the countless rescues he had made. Only now the stakes were far greater. He realized that her strength was not just in her title, but in her character, and it made him feel both respect and urgency. Then came the night that changed everything. A stealth team of assassins attempted to breach the compound. Their technology was advanced, silent, and deadly. Drones and sensors were disabled with precision, and it seemed as if no alarm would be raised. But Kai, watching from his hidden vantage point, noticed the pattern. He saw the shadows moving, the calculated steps of the intruders, and he knew that without intervention, Lyra could be in serious danger. Kai acted on instinct. He could not enter the compound, but he could warn someone. Using a small handheld transmitter, he sent a signal to a guard, carefully coded to sound like a system alert. Within minutes, the alarms blared, lights flashed, and the attackers were forced to retreat. The danger passed, but Kai knew this was only the beginning. Whoever wanted Lyra would not stop easily, and they would adapt to every defense placed in their path. Later, Lyra learned about his intervention. Though she did not see him directly, her aides informed her of a mysterious figure who had prevented a breach through quick thinking and unconventional tactics. She studied the report carefully, piecing together the man's bravery and ingenuity. Something about him felt familiar, almost like a memory she could not place. It was the same courage that had saved her life in the fire. Lyra realized that Kai was more than just a man. He represented something the galaxy had underestimated: human resilience, creativity, and moral strength. Machines and advanced technology were powerful, yes, but human determination could defy logic and expectation in ways no machine could predict. She made a decision then. She would find a way to meet him again, to understand the man who had changed her fate. Kai, for his part, did not yet know that she was aware of him. He continued to watch, to learn, and to plan. The knowledge of her royal status weighed heavily on him. He understood that helping her directly could be dangerous, but he could not stand idle. His human nature, curiosity, courage, and empathy would not allow it. The bond between them began to form in silence. He had saved her life without knowing who she was. She had survived an attack he indirectly prevented. In the quiet moments, when the city's lights reflected on the metallic surfaces of the compound, their stories intertwined without words. Kai represented action, instinct, and courage. Lyra represented wisdom, authority, and purpose. Together they embodied the strength of humanity in a galaxy that often underestimated it. Over the next week, Kai continued to observe and analyze the patterns of the threats against Lyra. He began to map the possible moves of the rogue faction, predicting their attacks and finding small ways to interfere without revealing himself. Each small victory strengthened his resolve. He realized that humans had a unique advantage: unpredictability. Machines followed programming. Plans could be anticipated, but a human could act in ways no algorithm could calculate. One night, while resting on a rooftop overlooking the city, Kai thought about the future. He wondered what would happen if he ever revealed himself to Lyra. Would she see him as a hero, a liability, or perhaps something else entirely? He did not know. All he knew was that she needed protection, and if there was any way he could help, he would. The fire had started it. His instincts had saved her. And now, the game was just beginning. Lyra, inside her compound, was not idle either. She reviewed strategies, studied intelligence reports, and considered the loyalty of those around her. Yet, a part of her mind kept returning to the man who had risked everything for her, without knowing who she was. He had acted purely out of courage and compassion. That thought gave her hope. Hope that even in a galaxy ruled by politics, technology, and power, humans could still make a difference, one courageous act at a time. The days passed, each more tense than the last. The rogue faction made more moves, testing the defenses of the compound, probing for weaknesses. Kai continued to watch, learning, predicting, and sometimes intervening in subtle ways. The human element, the unexpected, the bold, the fearless, became the secret weapon that neither side fully understood. Kai's life, once ordinary in its danger but predictable in routine, had become extraordinary. He was no longer just a firefighter. He was a silent guardian, a strategist, and a symbol of human ingenuity. And Lyra, though unaware of his identity at times, began to sense that her life had been touched by more than luck, by a force that could not be measured by technology, politics, or power. The courage of one human being who refused to give up, even in the face of unimaginable danger. Kai had never faced anything like this before. The fire had been one thing: chaos, heat, instinct. But the world Lyra inhabited was different. It was a web of secrets, politics, and danger that reached far beyond the city of Nova Prime. Yet, the more he watched, the more he realized that his skills as a human, his quick thinking, his courage, his adaptability, were exactly what could make a difference. The rogue faction was relentless. Every day they tested the defenses of Lyra's compound, sending drones, cybernetic spies, and even mercenaries. They wanted to destabilize the Solara dynasty, remove the last heir, and seize control of countless planets. Each attack was more sophisticated than the last, yet each time, Kai found a way to counter it, indirectly. He studied their patterns, predicted their moves, and used unconventional methods that no machine or standard security protocol could anticipate. Lyra, for her part, began to notice the subtle ways in which the attacks failed. She reviewed logs, interrogated staff, and discovered anomalies that could not be explained by technology alone. Someone, she realized, was intervening without being seen, and her mind, sharp and strategic, recognized the patterns of human ingenuity. She did not yet know it was Kai, but she sensed a presence, a guardian, someone who cared enough to act, who understood that courage could change outcomes faster than armies or machines. One evening, as the sun dipped below the neon horizon, Kai saw an opportunity. The faction had planned a major strike, a coordinated attack that would breach the compound from multiple angles simultaneously. Drones, armed robots, and elite mercenaries were moving in position. If successful, it could endanger not just Lyra, but everyone inside. He could not go inside, not openly, but he used his knowledge of the city and its systems to manipulate the environment. Traffic patterns, energy conduits, and security feeds, all were tools in his hands. He created distractions, rerouted drone signals, and triggered alarms in sectors where they would least expect it. The attack faltered. Chaos spread among the invaders, and they were forced to retreat. Lyra observed the failure of the attack with a mix of relief and curiosity. Someone had intervened in a way that no technology could account for. She made a decision. She needed to find this person. If someone like him existed, he could be invaluable. But finding him was not easy. The city was large, and he had hidden himself well. Kai, meanwhile, watched from a rooftop as the compound stabilized. He felt a strange satisfaction, a quiet pride. He had never sought recognition, yet the idea that he could influence events on this scale was intoxicating. He realized that humans had a power that was often overlooked, the ability to adapt, to improvise, and to act without waiting for permission or protocol. Machines could follow orders, predict outcomes, but humans could surprise, and that surprise was often decisive. The next day, Kai received an unexpected message. A small encrypted data packet appeared on one of his personal devices. It contained a simple message: "Meet me at the Northern Observatory at dusk. You have proven your worth." Maxime. His heart raced. Could it be? Was Lyra herself reaching out? He had expected secrecy, distance, caution, but this message carried trust and recognition. He quickly prepared, careful to avoid surveillance, and made his way to the observatory, a tall spire that overlooked the city and its shimmering lights. Lyra was already there when he arrived. She stood on the observation deck, her silhouette outlined by the neon skyline. She turned as he approached, and for the first time, their eyes met directly. There was no hesitation, no doubt. She nodded, acknowledging him not just as a savior, but as an ally. "Kai," she said simply, "I know what you've done. I know you've been helping, even when I couldn't see you." He felt a mix of surprise and pride. "I couldn't stand by," he said. "I've saved lives before, but yours is different. You're important, not just to this city, but to the whole coalition." She studied him carefully. "You understand more than most humans would," she said. You see possibilities where others see only obstacles. That is why I want you with me. Not as a soldier, not as a guard, but as a partner. Kai blinked. A partnership with a royal heir? The thought was dizzying, but he realized that it was not just an honor. It was a responsibility. Together, they could fight the threats that neither could face alone. His human intuition and courage, combined with her authority, strategy, and knowledge, could change the outcome of events that spanned planets. They began working together immediately. Lyra briefed him on the faction's history, their tactics, and their objectives. Kai offered insights from his perspective. Unexpected, unorthodox, but effective. They devised strategies that combined technology with human ingenuity, creating defenses and traps that the rogue faction could not anticipate. Days turned into nights filled with planning, training, and preparation. They moved through secret corridors and safe houses, learning to trust each other. Lyra began to rely on Kai's instincts as much as his actions, while Kai learned to navigate the complex political landscape surrounding her. Their bond deepened, built on mutual respect, understanding, and the shared knowledge that the stakes were higher than either could have imagined. Then came the first direct confrontation. The faction had infiltrated the city with a small elite team, seeking to kidnap Lyra during a public appearance. Kai and Lyra were ready, using a combination of misdirection, agility, and environmental advantage. They turned the city itself into a trap. Hovercars, bridges, and even neon signs became part of the defense. Machines and mercenaries were caught off guard by human unpredictability. Every time they moved, they adapted, learning from each step, exploiting weaknesses that no technology could hide. Lyra was in awe. She had known strategy and leadership, but the immediacy and creativity of human action astonished her. Kai's courage, combined with his ability to think quickly under pressure, made him a force unlike any other. Together, they defeated the intruders, leaving the city officials and security forces stunned at the effectiveness of their unorthodox approach. After the battle, as the city lights flickered and the remnants of the attack smoldered, Lyra looked at Kai. "You've changed the way I see humans," she said. "I always knew they were capable of great things, but seeing it in action, you make me believe that we can overcome any threat, no matter how advanced. I've always believed humans can do remarkable things. Sometimes you just need the right reason and the right person to make it matter." Their partnership became stronger with each passing day. They planned, fought, and strategized as a team. The rogue faction continued their attempts, but every attack only brought Kai and Lyra closer, sharpening their skills and strengthening their bond. It was no longer just about survival. It was about proving that courage, intelligence, and human determination could stand against overwhelming odds. Kai began to realize something profound. His life, once filled with ordinary dangers of fire and accidents, had now expanded into something extraordinary. He was no longer just a firefighter. He was a key player in a battle that could determine the future of a galaxy. And in Lyra, he found someone who saw his worth, not as a tool, but as an equal partner. Lyra, too, saw the truth. Titles and royal heritage were meaningless without the strength to act. Kai had saved her life once in a fire, and now he was saving her again through courage, strategy, and the unpredictable power of being human. She began to trust him completely, knowing that together they could face the rogue faction, the threats to her dynasty, and the challenges of a galaxy that often underestimated the human spirit. They worked late into the nights, reviewing maps of the city, enemy movements, and potential weaknesses. Kai suggested unorthodox tactics, often using the environment to their advantage. Bridges could collapse at just the right moment. Energy fields could mislead drones, and city traffic could become a weapon against the enemy. Lyra marveled at his creativity, realizing that humans, when guided by courage and intelligence, could outmatch even the most advanced technology. The final plan was bold. They would draw the rogue faction into a trap, using both human ingenuity and Lyra's political influence. Every detail had to be perfect, yet flexible. They had learned that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, so adaptability was key. Kai and Lyra trained together, rehearsing every scenario, preparing for the unexpected, and building trust that no threat could shake. Kai often thought back to the moment he first carried her from the fire. He had acted without knowing who she was, simply following instinct. Now they were equals, partners in a struggle that spanned not just the city, but the stars. And he realized something he had never understood before. Human courage was not just a matter of survival. It could change destinies, shape worlds, and protect the ones you cared for. In the weeks that followed, Kai and Lyra's bond deepened. Their teamwork became seamless, their communication almost instinctive. They were no longer just protector and protected. They were allies, friends, and a force that the rogue faction could not predict. The human spirit, combined with royal insight, had become unstoppable, and as they prepared for the next wave of attacks, both knew that their fight was far from over. The rogue faction would return, stronger and smarter, but they also knew something the enemy could never anticipate. The courage of one human and the wisdom of one royal, united by trust, determination, and an unbreakable will to survive. The city of Nova Prime had never seen a night like this. Neon lights reflected on the polished streets, casting long shadows across the towering skyscrapers. The air hummed with tension, as if the city itself sensed the storm approaching. Kai and Lyra stood together on a rooftop overlooking the heart of the city, watching the rogue faction's forces assemble like predators preparing to strike. The time had come for their final confrontation. Kai adjusted his jacket and checked his gear one last time. He had anticipated every move the enemy could make, but he knew that even the best plan could fail if they underestimated human unpredictability. "Are you ready?" he asked. His voice was steady, but his mind raced with calculations, contingencies, and possibilities. Lyra nodded. Her eyes were calm, her posture regal, yet there was fire in her gaze. "I've never been more ready," she said. "We know what they want. We know what they'll do. And now they will face us together. Not just machines and guards, but humans who will not yield." The first wave of attackers arrived with precision. Hover drones, armed with energy cannons, buzzed through the streets below, scanning for targets. Elite mercenaries moved with synchronized steps, blending into shadows, ready to strike. But Kai and Lyra had prepared the city itself as a weapon. Kai activated a series of magnetic pulse generators he had hidden across the streets. Drones faltered, their circuits disrupted by the sudden interference. Mercenaries hesitated, unsure of what was happening. It was exactly the chaos Kai had planned for, unpredictable, human, and disorienting. Lyra, standing beside him, coordinated the city's defenses. Lights flickered in coded patterns to mislead intruders. Barricades shifted, and surveillance systems rerouted to create false paths. Every move was calculated, yet adaptable. Kai watched her work, marveling at how her royal training combined with human intuition created strategies no enemy could anticipate. The first skirmish erupted in the city center. Kai led a team of volunteers and city responders, humans armed with quick thinking, courage, and determination. They were not soldiers, not superhumans, just people willing to act. Yet their unpredictability gave them an advantage over the disciplined, calculated enemy. Bridges collapsed at the right moment, forcing mercenaries into traps. Energy fields overloaded, sending drones crashing. The city itself seemed alive, responding to Kai and Lyra's combined influence. Lyra moved through the battlefield with grace and authority, directing her people, motivating them, and providing critical decisions under pressure. She was more than royalty now. She was a leader in the truest sense, inspiring courage in humans who might have thought themselves ordinary. Kai fought alongside her, his instincts guiding him through every explosion, every collapsing structure, every sudden threat. The rogue faction, realizing their advantage was slipping, unleashed their most dangerous weapon, a massive assault drone designed to penetrate defenses and neutralize any threat. It hovered above the city like a dark omen, firing pulses that disrupted communications and weakened structures. Civilians had been evacuated, but the stakes were higher than ever. If this drone succeeded, the city could fall, and Lyra's safety would be compromised. Kai did not hesitate. Using a combination of speed, agility, and quick improvisation, he maneuvered through the streets, drawing the drone's fire, while Lyra coordinated a trap. He led it toward a section of the city where magnetic generators, energy conduits, and high-rise scaffolding formed a perfect funnel. The drone's systems faltered as Kai lured it into the trap, and with a coordinated strike from Lyra's team, it was destroyed in a spectacular explosion that lit the night sky. But victory came at a cost. Several mercenaries had breached the inner perimeter, approaching Lyra with weapons ready. Kai intercepted them with a combination of brute strength, human ingenuity, and fearless determination. He improvised weapons from debris, used shadows to his advantage, and anticipated their moves in ways the machines of the faction could not predict. Every human instinct he had ever relied upon came into play. Lyra watched him, realizing that the man who had once rushed into fire without thought now fought with the precision of a strategist and the heart of a hero. Her trust in him, forged over weeks of planning, observation, and shared danger, proved invaluable. Together they neutralized the intruders, showing that human courage and intelligence could outmatch technology in numbers. As the battle reached its peak, the rogue faction's leader appeared, a man clad in advanced armor, armed with weapons that could destroy buildings. He moved with a calculated ruthlessness. He sought to capture Lyra personally, believing that removing her would collapse the Solara dynasty. But Kai and Lyra were ready. Using a combination of misdirection and human unpredictability, they turned the environment against him. Energy fields malfunctioned, structural supports shifted, and the leader found himself trapped in a web of chaos he could not control. Kai's quick thinking, Lyra's strategic commands, and the sheer adaptability of humans made the difference. No technology, no matter how advanced, could anticipate the choices that humans made in the moment. The final confrontation was intense. Kai and Lyra moved as one, their actions synchronized yet unpredictable. They disarmed the rogue leader, neutralized his weapons, and forced him to surrender. The faction's remaining forces, witnessing their failure, retreated in disarray. Nova Prime was safe, and Lyra's position as heir remained secure. As dawn broke, casting a golden glow over the city, Kai and Lyra stood together on a high terrace, overlooking the streets they had fought to protect. Citizens emerged from their shelters, cheering for the victory. But more importantly, recognizing that human courage had triumphed over overwhelming odds. Machines, weapons, and strategy could only go so far. Human spirit, determination, and ingenuity had made the final difference. Lyra turned to Kai, her expression a mixture of gratitude and respect. "You have done more than save my life," she said. "You have shown me the true strength of humanity. We could have lost everything, but your courage and quick thinking made the impossible possible." Kai shrugged, a faint smile on his face. "I didn't do it for glory. I did it because it was the right thing. And because I couldn't let you face it alone." She nodded, understanding the depth of his words. In that moment, the bond between them, forged through fire, danger, and shared struggle, became unbreakable. They had proven something extraordinary, that even in a galaxy dominated by technology and politics, human courage, creativity, and determination could change the course of events. In the days that followed, Nova Prime slowly returned to normal. The rogue faction had been dealt a significant blow, their plans exposed and dismantled. Lyra's role as heir became widely recognized, and she began initiatives to strengthen alliances across the coalition, inspired by the resilience she had witnessed in Kai and the citizens of the city. Kai returned to his ordinary life, though he knew nothing would ever feel ordinary again. He had discovered the true power of human courage and ingenuity, and he had proven that one person could make a difference even against enemies far stronger and more advanced. He continued to serve the city, but now with a new perspective, knowing that his actions could ripple across planets, and that humans were capable of extraordinary things when they refused to give up. Lyra often visited him, and together they planned ways to strengthen defenses, prepare for future threats, and inspire others. Their partnership had begun in fire, tested through conspiracy, and proven in battle. They knew that challenges would come again, but they also knew that humans, when united by courage and purpose, could face anything. Kai thought back to the first day he had rushed into the flames, not knowing who she was, driven only by instinct and courage. That one act had set in motion a chain of events that changed the fate of worlds. And as he looked at Lyra standing beside him, he realized that true heroism was not about titles, power, or recognition. It was about acting when it mattered, protecting those who could not protect themselves, and believing in the strength of humanity, even in the darkest moments. Lyra smiled at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and admiration. "The galaxy underestimates humans," she said softly. "But I've seen what we can do together. I will never forget it." Kai nodded, understanding, fully. He had run into fire to save her, not knowing her true identity. But now he knew that courage, loyalty, and human ingenuity were far more powerful than any title or weapon. And in that moment, high above Nova Prime, with the city alive and safe below, they both knew that the human spirit, undaunted, creative, and fearless, had won. The stars above twinkled, indifferent yet beautiful, as if the universe itself had witnessed their victory. Kai and Lyra stood together, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the bond forged through fire, danger, and trust would guide them through every challenge. And in that moment, humanity had truly triumphed.